the enhanced emergency call that could change everything. For weeks, investigators and the public have searched for one answer: what really happened to Nolan Wells? Now, a newly released version of the emergency call has sparked an entirely new wave of questions. The recording was released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources and has quickly become one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the case. Unlike the unofficial clips circulating online, this recording comes from an official source and has prompted audio experts to examine every second of the background sounds. What they believe they hear has shocked many people following the investigation. According to analysts featured on Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, voices in the background may be saying phrases like "wake him up" or asking "is he dead" before the caller begins speaking with the emergency dispatcher. At this point, investigators have not confirmed that these words were actually spoken. The interpretation comes from enhanced audio analysis and remains a subject of debate. However, the possibility alone has changed the conversation surrounding the case. If those voices are accurately interpreted, it could suggest that concern about Nolan's condition existed while the emergency call was still in progress. That possibility raises an important question. What exactly was happening on the boat before anyone realized Nolan was missing? The emergency call itself begins with a request for help because the boat's bilge pump had reportedly stopped working. The caller tells the dispatcher that the boat is taking on water and asks for assistance. Throughout the conversation, the focus remains on saving the boat rather than discussing a missing passenger. The dispatcher asks several routine questions. How much water is entering the boat? Where exactly are you located? Do you need to be towed? The caller responds calmly and continues describing the mechanical problem. But behind that conversation, investigators and audio specialists believe there may be additional voices that were difficult to hear in the original recording. Modern audio enhancement technology allows experts to reduce background noise, isolate voices, and amplify conversations that were previously buried beneath other sounds. While enhanced recordings are useful investigative tools, they are not considered proof by themselves. Every interpretation must still be verified through the complete investigation. Even so, the recording has created one of the biggest developments since Nolan's disappearance. For the first time, attention is shifting away from only what was said to the dispatcher and toward what may have been happening in the background before anyone knew the full story. And as investigators continue reviewing the recording, another part of the emergency call is raising even more questions. It is not about the voices. It is about the boat itself. Because what happened after that phone call may be just as important as what happened during it. The boat timeline that no longer makes sense. As investigators and the public examined the enhanced emergency call, another question quickly emerged. If the boat was truly in danger of sinking, why does its timeline appear so unusual? According to the emergency call, the caller reported that the bilge pump had failed and that the boat was taking on water. The request was straightforward. They wanted assistance and asked for the boat to be towed. The dispatcher asked whether the boat was grounded or floating in open water. The caller answered that they were in approximately 31 feet of water and needed help recovering the boat. At first, this sounded like a routine marine emergency. But when investigators reconstructed what happened afterward, the sequence of events became much more difficult to understand. Reports discussed during the investigation indicate that the boat was eventually towed away from the island. However, instead of immediately being removed from service for inspection, records suggest that it continued making multiple movements before finally being transported out of the water. That timeline has become one of the most debated aspects of the case. Why would a boat that had reportedly been taking on enough water to trigger an emergency call continue moving several times afterward? Marine experts point out that a failed bilge pump does not always mean a boat will immediately sink. The seriousness depends on how much water is entering the hull and whether the leak can be controlled. Even so, many people have questioned whether the situation described during the emergency call accurately reflected the condition of the boat. Another detail has also attracted significant attention. During the call, the audio quality is surprisingly clear. The caller speaks with the dispatcher without major interruptions, and the connection remains stable throughout much of the conversation. This has led some observers to question earlier claims that cell service around Horn Island was too weak for reliable communication. It is important to note that signal strength can vary depending on the carrier, the exact location, weather conditions, and the specific device being used. A successful emergency call does not automatically prove that every phone in the area had reliable service. Still, the recording has reopened the discussion. If communication was possible during the emergency, could additional calls, messages, photos, or videos exist that investigators have not publicly discussed? Another point raised during the broadcast involves the behavior of everyone on board. According to the emergency call, the dispatcher asks whether everyone is safely off the boat. The caller responds that everyone is off. That statement has generated intense discussion because Nolan would later become the focus of a massive search. Investigators have not publicly explained exactly where every passenger was at each moment during the emergency response. As a result, many questions remain unanswered. Who was accounted for when that statement was made? Who last saw Nolan alive? And at what point did everyone realize he was no longer with the group? These are questions that only investigators, witness interviews, digital evidence, and forensic analysis can ultimately answer. For now, the emergency call provides only one piece of a much larger puzzle. But there is another development that could prove even more significant. It involves what forensic experts believe should happen next. Because according to several specialists, one critical part of the investigation may still hold valuable evidence, even weeks after Nolan disappeared. As the debate over the emergency call continues, another part of the investigation is drawing just as much attention: the forensic evidence. Several medical and investigative experts have emphasized that one official recording alone cannot determine what happened to Nolan Wells. Only physical evidence can answer that question. One of the biggest discussions involves the autopsy. During the broadcast, forensic specialists explained that some tissue from Nolan's neck was reportedly preserved for additional examination. That detail immediately caught the attention of legal analysts because it is not something the public normally hears about. According to the experts, preserving tissue does not automatically indicate foul play. Instead, it may simply mean the medical examiner wanted to perform more detailed microscopic testing before reaching a final conclusion. When a body remains in water for an extended period, decomposition creates enormous challenges for forensic pathologists. Natural changes after death can sometimes resemble injuries. Blood can move within tissue. Muscle can change color. Structures become much harder to evaluate. Because of this, investigators must carefully determine whether any findings occurred before death or developed afterward through natural decomposition. One forensic expert explained that if doctors are trying to determine whether a person suffered trauma to the neck, they may preserve specific structures for additional laboratory analysis. These examinations can include the muscles surrounding the airway, the hyoid bone, and the cartilage of the neck. Those tests may help determine whether there are signs of significant injury. However, the experts also stressed an important point. None of this proves that Nolan was assaulted. It simply explains why additional examination may be necessary before investigators reach a final medical conclusion. Another topic discussed during the investigation involves the lungs. Many people assume that finding water inside the lungs automatically proves someone drowned. Forensic pathologists say the reality is much more complicated. Water may be present for several reasons, and no single finding can independently confirm drowning. Instead, medical examiners must evaluate the entire body, the scene, witness statements, toxicology results, and every other piece of available evidence before determining the official cause and manner of death. That careful process takes time. Meanwhile, investigators continue reviewing every possible source of evidence: witness interviews, digital devices, phone records, boat inspections, audio recordings, and every statement made by those who were present that day. Several experts interviewed during the program also discussed whether additional forensic tools could still be useful. They suggested that advanced audio enhancement could further isolate background voices from the emergency call. Others mentioned that specially trained cadaver dogs have detected human remains months after previous investigations, although no announcement has been made that such methods are being used in Nolan's case. These comments reflect expert opinions about investigative techniques, not confirmed actions by law enforcement. For now, authorities have not publicly announced any criminal charges or declared that a homicide occurred. The investigation remains active, and every new piece of evidence is being evaluated alongside everything that investigators have already collected. But perhaps the biggest question is no longer what happened during the emergency call. It is what investigators will do next, because the next stage of this investigation could determine whether the unanswered questions finally receive clear answers, or whether the mystery surrounding Nolan Wells continues even longer. What happens next and why this investigation is far from over. Nearly every major investigation reaches a point where public speculation begins to move faster than the evidence. The Nolan Wells case has now reached that point. The release of the enhanced emergency call has generated thousands of new theories across social media. Some people believe the recording changes everything. Others argue that it changes nothing until investigators verify exactly what was said. For law enforcement, neither opinion matters, only evidence does. Investigators are expected to continue examining every available piece of information before reaching any final conclusions. That includes the emergency call itself. Modern forensic audio technology allows specialists to separate overlapping voices, reduce background noise, and compare different speakers. If additional portions of the recording become clearer, investigators may gain a better understanding of what was happening on the boat during those critical moments. At the same time, detectives will likely continue comparing the audio with witness interviews, digital evidence, phone records, GPS information, and the physical evidence already collected during the investigation. Each piece must support the others. If one statement conflicts with the timeline, investigators must determine why. If digital evidence contradicts witness accounts, they must investigate further. If forensic findings raise additional questions, they must continue testing until those questions are answered. Another issue attracting attention is the reward that has been offered for information leading to answers in Nolan's death. Authorities continue encouraging anyone with first-hand knowledge to come forward. Investigators have repeatedly emphasized that even information that appears minor could become important when combined with other evidence. Meanwhile, prosecutors have also stated that the investigation is being handled with the same level of care as every major unexplained death. They have acknowledged the public's desire for immediate answers, but stressed that reaching the correct conclusion is more important than reaching a quick one. That message has remained consistent throughout the investigation. Follow the evidence. Verify every fact. Ignore speculation until it can be confirmed. For Nolan's family, however, the waiting continues. Every new development brings hope that the truth may finally emerge. But every unanswered question also prolongs the uncertainty. Did the enhanced emergency call capture something investigators had not previously recognized? Will additional forensic testing provide new answers? Could future witness interviews clarify what happened during those final moments? Today, no one outside the investigation can answer those questions with certainty. What we do know is that the case remains active. Authorities continue reviewing evidence. Experts continue analyzing the available information, and the search for the truth is far from over. As new official developments become available, this investigation may take an entirely different direction. Until then, every confirmed fact matters. Every verified piece of evidence deserves careful examination. And above all, Nolan Wells and his family deserve answers based on facts, not assumptions.